Hello, hello, and welcome to Metroid Mondays on Shatter Our Souls. Now, we have recently gotten ourselves the Spider Ball and are tackling the next major boss, which is the Powerbomb Guardian. Now, I admit that throughout the course of the Metroid Prime 2 section of this channel, I have kind of neglected what made the original series as positive as it was. And so today I took a little bit of a look through some of the forum posts out and about that have numerous, I suppose you'd say, theories involved regarding Metroid Prime 2 as a whole. And some of them I found to be, level of plausible deniability. Others just made sense, and some did not. Um, One of the theories that came to light very early on was that the Emperor Ing was in fact the seed guardian of the Leviathan that fell on, I guess, Aether, Dark Aether combined. And I first of all, I was under the impression that this was more or less a given. The Ing were meant as the ing that got stuck within the Leviathan seed before it got sent off would have evolved into the Emperor ing. And I don't necessarily see this one as a negative. I see it as just a fact. A This is how it goes in this realm, in this game. This franchise is that evolution happens on a exceptionally fast basis. The same, however, cannot be said for one of the other theories that came up, which is that the Ing were innocent or were also victims in this particular circumstance. Now, I'll admit that the Ing being victims has a lot more of a, shall I say, a hot take mentality, and a little bit more meat to dig into with this one. Effectively, what it states is that the impact of the meteor itself led the combined dimensional fluxed planet of Aether and Dark Aether to both fall into turmoil. And that the Ing, upon seeing buildings get built by the Luminoth, were seen as Luminoth being invaders of this planet. But, first of all, cool. I like the idea, but it kind of falls a little bit short. The idea was that the Ing slowly but surely were possessed and were dealt a bad hand by the by the Phazon in and of itself, and that it warped their minds and changed what they were initially. This is partially because of the logbook entries of the Ing. And I can get behind it. There's a level of plausible deniability here. Also, for those of you wondering, no, there were not references in the site I used. I wish I could reference this. It's just something that didn't come up till later. Um, but the issue that I have with it comes in three forms. First of all, the architecture of the Luminoth is echoed in the Dark World, which, okay, fine. If it's just the Luminoth making it and this architecture appearing out of nowhere, absolutely, they were being invaded. But it wasn't. And you can tell because of the difference in how the architecture looks between the light and dark sides of Aether. They are not one-to-one comparisons. Secondly, the next major issue that crops up with that is that by and large, the Ing are not the victims, they are the perpetrators, and they were brought in by the meteor itself. And due to the energy of Aether and its ability to be a hospitable and lively home for them, they flourished as an invasive species would. This is the first major flaw in the logic. The Ing are an invasive species, and yes, they are actively evolving. They went from being, just standardized enemies to being capable of effectively demonic possession. This is a pretty big leap in their evolutionary traits and the traits of Phazon as a whole. But it is not so big a leap that it isn't to be expected of a individual that was born or created on the planet Phase. And the next major argument is that the Phase Ing, which show up as effectively a palette swap or reskin of the Ing in and of itself, didn't really have enough of a difference between A and B to justify saying that there was any leap in evolution. Effectively, the Ing existed prior to the meteor, but not in the state or the well-being that they were in during the events of the game. All this is to say, I do not believe the Ing are innocent. They are just slightly misunderstood. And the last one that kind of came to mind that seemed a little bit interesting was that Dark Samus learned a lot of its abilities from the Ing themselves. And I can actually get behind this one a lot easier than I can a lot of theories that crop up. Dark Samus was present at the time when Samus's abilities were copied. Now, I say this with a level of, yeah, that's just how it is, that's the storyline. But it goes, the theory, while it didn't go much deeper than just, yeah, this is what happened, and it, and how Dark Samus was able to use a number of the abilities in some form or another that the Ing had stolen, doesn't mean that Dark Samus was this be-all end-all creature. But what it does kind of hint at is that Dark Samus, as a general statement, was able to copy certain abilities that made the Ing such a dangerous race to begin with. That being the ability to puddleify, the ability to copy other creatures' abilities, such as Samus's abilities, and the ability to cross between the dimensional planes on aether. Now, I have to be clear about this. It's not something that is shown to affect Dark Samus in later portions of the games and later in the series, but it is something that does show up in the finale or near the ending of Metroid Prime 2 in general. Dark Samus is seen first in the Dark World and is capable of traversing back and forth numerous times throughout. And through the use of, shall we say, the Ing's demonic possession, Dark Samus was able to get a grip on other species, like the space pirates, to get a foothold and get a leg up on the competition to become a stronger, more well-versed warrior. I can get behind this. All in all, these all sort of make sense, to a degree. But tell me what you think below, and if you know who originally made these, I'd love to hear it, because, truth be told, I'd love to be able to shake their hand and say, I like that. I like that they're putting further thought towards it. Um, but the last theory that cropped up is one that I wholeheartedly disagree with. and it was that Ridley was involved the entire time. And the theory basically goes on to state that the ease at which Dark Samus, Ridley, and the Space Pirates became partners in general made very little sense. And to a degree, I have to give credit where it's due. There had to be some level of former understanding of one another. However, the fact that the Dark Hunter, the version of Dark Samus itself, had logs dedicated to it in the space pirate hideout in the Agon Waste. Therefore, it stands to reason that there is some level of understanding of Dark Samus. And while I'm not sure what form of communication the pair could use, Ridley is not one to shy away from looking for a hand or help where necessary, usually in the form of technology, but technically not all that out there. So I can somewhat get behind this theory. But the issue is that Dark Samus in Prime 3 was resurrected in a Phazon holding chamber somewhere within space pirate hideouts, probably on the space pirate homeworld. This would mean, by extension, that Dark Samus could theoretically be resurrected anywhere that there is a strong enough Phazon presence. It just so happened that the space pirates had that Phazon presence that Dark Samus needed. Now, eye for an eye, Dark Samus is kind of an odd creature. There are many times that I feel like it has a less logical approach than the space pirates, and at other times I think that it's the one pulling the strings. So, assuming it's a eye for an eye and it just so happens to be the space pirates pulling the strings in the attack on Norion in Prime 3, that would mean that Dark Samus was a puppet of sorts. But I believe the much more likely option was Phazon corruption. Meta Ridley in Prime 3 is a very different creature than it was in Prime 1. And I don't think that there's a very much to hazard a guess there. From how it looks, the eyes itself being a blazing red, the red bloody jaws, and the painting of the iron and steel in Meta Ridley, turning it more of a blue color instead of silver, made Meta Ridley a very different creature. I believe that Ridley was corrupted by Phazon prior to the corruption of the Hunters. Think of it as a little science experiment. If Dark Samus knew it could corrupt Ridley, which is seen as a rather intelligent being across the entirety of the series, that would mean that theoretically it would be able to corrupt other beings. And that's where the plan to corrupt the Hunters of Prime 3 came from, was Dark Samus taking over and corrupting or manipulating the thought patterns and actions of the space pirates as a whole. Do I think that this is the most logical thing? Absolutely not. But I do believe that there is legs to stand on for this particular side of it. Whereas just stating that, oh, Ridley saw what happened on Aether and wanted to get a leg up on Samus just didn't really feel right. Yes, he would use whatever means was necessary, but he's not one to share power. So, that's my thought on it. Anywho, with the power bombs in hand, I figured I was going to take a little bit of a wander around Torvus Bog. The reason is because there are a number of bosses coming up that are exceptionally stronger than what we faced prior. The one that really scares me, well, two, is the battle against Dark Samus within the Sanctuary Fortress, followed very, very quickly by the battle with Quadraxis. Now, Quadraxis is kind of a 50-50. It's one of those bosses that could be easy or could be incredibly hard depending on which end of the spectrum I sit on. And the reality of Quadraxis is that for the bulk of the bosses in Prime 2, especially the Dark World bosses, there's healing springs or those light crystals that are capable of healing Samus throughout the fight, effectively giving Samus more health throughout the duration of the battle. However, Quadraxis does not have that. Think of it as the final test for the Dark Suit, and one that I believe is very fitting. The battle against Quadraxis then will be the hardest main game battle. As such, I want to be fairly well prepared. So I'm taking some time while I have it to get a couple items here and there, a couple health kits, missiles, that kind of stuff, because at the moment I'm sitting at just around 50% of all pickups in the game, which is not a bad number to have. It is an amount that is functional to complete the game with. But this is Hypermode. I have never beaten Metroid Prime 2 on anything above normal mode before. So I'm taking the time that I need to ensure that I am adequately prepared for the battles that come. Speaking of the battles that come, with the power bombs in hand, I now have a little bit of an ace. So I'm not sure if I used it very often in Prime 1. But the Ing Smashers and the Elite Pirates function very similarly. And the result of them functioning incredibly similarly means that I have what I need at the moment to be able to battle the Ing Smashers one-on-one without risk. Now, don't get me wrong, I believe the Ing Smasher and the Elite Pirates aren't the hardest enemies out there. They're big, they're bulky, they're slow. But they are also incredibly well armored and heavy damage sponges. So, in order to prevent taking what I'll call an excess amount of damage, we are going to be using power bombs on them for the foreseeable future. And this is due to... I've never seen that before. I didn't realize that you could actually see little lines where they teleport to when you don't have the dark mask on. That is a cool little detail. Huh. Anyways, Ink Smashers from now on I'm going to be using the power bombs on. The reason I want to use power bombs on them is it is an instant one-hit KO. At least by my recollection from normal mode. Theoretically, it might change, but I don't foresee that changing. Because it is considered an instant KO, I have effectively a run-on-sight order from the enemies. Oh. Okay, I have to get a power bomb before I can do that. I think there's another energy tank back there, but I'll be honest, I don't remember. Uh, yeah, I'm gonna have to leave out the main entrance here. So, I don't know. I like the idea behind the Ing Smashers, but I find that when Metroid introduces incredibly bulky opponents, they more or less just become target practice. And I feel like this is much the same for a number of sci-fi fantasy games, is that the bigger the target, the harder they fall, right? Okay, cool. There's my power bomb I need, so time to skedoodle. Um, so I mean, within reason, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. The Omega Pirate, for example, is bar none the largest opponent that you face in Prime 1, with the only possible exceptions being Thardus, Flagra, or the Metroid Prime itself. This creature is incredibly huge, incredibly devastating, and yet within the main game, it or within normal mode is reasonable to defeat fairly easily. So it stands to reason that doing it a second time wouldn't be the end of the world. And that bigger they are, the harder they fall mentality just means that they're target practice. They're there to provide a challenge, but your entire goal for dealing damage is to hit specific locations on the enemy's body. So, because most of their body is now invulnerable. Anywho, just outside here we have, I think, the light beams missile upgrade. I could be wrong, but the light beam, the dark beam, and the annihilator beam are all weapons of rather potent power, and each of the three different varieties have their own upgraded versions through the super missiles. What the dark beams is effectively a mini black hole. Pretty potent in my opinion. I don't have a kinetic orb cannon over here. I can't do this challenge yet. I need not the space jump, the screw attack. So that's fun. Anywho, as I was getting at, there are three upgraded versions of the weapons that you have. And while one acts as a black hole, the next act, acts like a miniature sun, and the third just, well, I admit I don't think I've ever used the Annihilator Beam's super missile. Never had a reason to after the point in time that you get the Annihilator Beam because of how late in the game it is. Small oversight. So I don't actually know. But I do know that Samus in Metroid Prime 2 is stronger than the Samus in Prime 1. And the bar, admittedly, is not all that. It is fairly close. A lot of people say that the Prime 2 version of Samus is this multi-dimensional threat. And while I hear and understand that there is a little bit of a theory and, the light world, dark world duality and how Samus was able to defeat the Emperor Ing, and by removing the energy of the light of aether from dark aether, it was capable of destroying an entire dimension. This wasn't Samus's raw power. Thus, we have to look at the abilities that Samus can replicate. And one of the abilities that can be replicated is none other than her, um, the Annihilator Beam. The Annihilator Beam is effectively an antimatter cannon, which is to say, incredibly powerful. Anything that antimatter touches will be effectively erased. There's no in between with this type of weapon. because it is effectively erasing the matter that it hit, it is by far and away the single most powerful weapon that Samus gains access to in the Prime trilogy, in my opinion. With the only possible exception being the Hyper Beam, which can't be replicated by Prime 1 Samus, or the Hyper Beam / Nova Beam of Prime 3. But the Prime 3 variant is much the same as Prime 1's, just with a different coat of paint. Personally, I'd like to give the win to the Nova Beam, where it's effectively firing gamma rays at an opponent that can pierce through armor and whatnot. But it is... I don't think the gamma rays can do quite as much damage as antimatter can. But this is just, conjecture based on a limited understanding of the circumstances and what the weapons are trying to emulate. Anywho, with this, we are entering what I'll call the final stretch. We have every weapon, sans for one, or we have all except for 3 upgrades in the game. The Screw Attack, which I'm aiming to get next episode, or next week. The Light Suit, which is the final upgrade. And last, the Annihilator Beam, which might take another couple weeks before I get, but theoretically will be, when I battle Quadraxis, that will become a very easy item to keep on hand. But let me know what you think. Is Prime 2 Samus stronger than Prime 1? Is Prime 1 Samus more powerful than Prime 2? Is there a difference between them at all? Let me know down in the comments. And while you're there, be sure to leave a like, a subscribe, and we'll be sure to drop a powerbomb on these guys. Hooray, Ink Smashers! I finally get to prove my point. Okay, drop a powerbomb, and it did nothing. Oh no. Is this a... We're gonna try again. I heard something. He evaporated this time. Cool, so it was just a oversight on my part. Okay, I have to wait until it starts taking the hit, or attempting to attack me before I drop the kaboom. Got it. One earth-shattering kaboom coming right up. Anywho, as I was saying, drop a like, leave a subscribe, be good to one another, and we'll catch you next time. Can't believe it. I didn't actually think I'd be able to get to the Sanctuary Fortress without too much of an issue. This is surprising.